Mark Levin leaned back in his chair, lips curling into a grin that was less amusement than scorn. His voice cut through the chamber, mocking, dismissive, as he chuckled at Jasmine Crockett's law degree. The laugh wasn't light. It was sharp, designed to humiliate. His words carried the smugness of someone who thought credentials were toys reserved only for his circle of power. The room reacted instantly. A low ripple of murmurs spread like a wave. Faces shifted, some with discomfort, others with thinly veiled delight at the jab. Cameras swung to capture every expression, every twitch of tension. In that moment, it wasn't just about a degree, it was about respect, dignity, and whether a woman like Crockett had the right to stand on equal ground. Crockett's eyes narrowed slightly, but her composure never cracked. She didn't fire back, not yet. Instead, she let the silence stretch, let the weight of his insult hang heavy in the air. Viewers watching from home could feel it, the arrogance of power colliding with the patience of someone who had weathered worse storms. And then came the tease of history in the making, because what Jasmine Crockett said next froze the room and left Mark Levin exposed. Levin's mocking laughter wasn't just a throwaway line. It was a calculated dismissal, one that struck at the very foundation of who Jasmine Crockett was and what she represented. To him, the degree she had earned through sleepless nights and relentless grind was little more than a punchline. But to millions watching, that sneer carried a deeper meaning. It was the familiar tone of gatekeepers who had, for generations, tried to belittle those who didn't come from their world, their schools, their pedigree of privilege. For Crockett, this wasn't the first time her qualifications had been questioned. From law school lectures where she was underestimated, to courtrooms where her voice had to fight twice as hard to be heard, she had learned that competence wasn't always enough. Appearance, identity, and background were unfairly weighed against her. And here, under the glaring lights, Levin had condensed all of that prejudice into a single laugh. The room knew it too. You could sense it in the uneasy shuffling, the way eyes darted between the two figures. Levin, the entrenched media powerhouse, seemed to embody the old guard. White, male, dripping with elitism. Crockett, standing across from him, carried something more fragile, yet infinitely more powerful. The hope of every person who had been told they weren't qualified enough. And that was why this moment mattered. This wasn't just a debate, it was symbolic combat. Levin's arrogance stood for every institution that sneers at outsiders. Crockett's silence, steady, deliberate, wasn't weakness. It was strategy. She was letting him dig his own hole, waiting for the perfect second to strike. Because Levin thought he had ended the exchange with his mockery. But he had only set the stage. What Jasmine Crockett was about to say would transform that insult into her weapon. And when she unleashed it, the balance of power in that room would shift forever. Mark Levin did not rise to prominence by accident. He carved his path in American media with a voice like a hammer, loud, forceful, unapologetically dismissive. To his followers, he was a truth teller, a man unafraid to say what others would not. But to his critics, he was the embodiment of arrogance, a bully dressed in Ivy League credentials, wielding condescension as both shield and sword. Educated in elite halls that seemed designed to crown certain men as authorities, Levin absorbed the posture of superiority early. He wore his law degree not as a testament to service or hard work, but as proof of belonging to a club few could enter. And once inside, he never let anyone forget it. His style on radio and television became unmistakable: belittle, mock, shout over, and when cornered, sneer. Arguments were not won with logic. They were drowned in volume. Time and again, Levin positioned himself as gatekeeper of what was serious and worthy in politics and law. When guests dared challenge him, he cut them off mid-sentence, his voice rising, cadence sharp. For him, dissent wasn't an opportunity for dialogue. It was a chance to showcase dominance. The more flustered his opponents became, the more he relished the performance. And the controversies piled up. He called opponents idiots, losers, and worse, stripping debates of substance until they resembled schoolyard taunts. He mocked accents, questioned intelligence, and reduced years of public service to a punchline. The cruelty was the point. It was theater for his base. His reputation as a radio firebrand wasn't built on thoughtful analysis, but on the thrill of derision. People didn't tune in to learn. They tuned in to watch him burn someone down. Yet beneath the bluster lay something more fragile. Levin depended on the imbalance of power, on environments where his microphone was louder, his interruptions unchecked. Against those unprepared or unwilling to spar at his volume, he always had the advantage. But when faced with someone steady, someone unwilling to bend under mockery, his arsenal looked thinner. His jabs revealed themselves for what they were, distractions, not substance. And this was where his arrogance became his undoing. Because arrogance is not just a weapon, it is a blindfold. Levin believed mocking Jasmine Crockett's law degree would expose her as small, inadequate, undeserving of respect. He thought it would entertain, reaffirm his superiority, and end the exchange before it began. But in assuming his laugh would be the final word, he overlooked the resilience of someone who had heard that laugh her entire life and had learned how to turn it back on those who wielded it. Levin's career had thrived on tearing others down. He had won headlines by shouting, ratings by sneering, influence by deriding. But influence built on mockery is fragile. It crumbles the moment the target refuses to flinch. And Crockett was not going to flinch. For years, Levin had been the voice that silenced others. Now, he was about to meet the silence of someone who refused to be diminished. It was not the silence of defeat. It was the silence before a storm. Because arrogance, as history has always shown, has a way of planting the seeds of its own undoing. And in that chamber, Levin had just planted his. Long before Jasmine Crockett stood under the glare of cameras, facing the sneer of Mark Levin, she had lived the kind of story that doesn't often get told in the polished halls of power. Hers was not the tale of inherited privilege or doors opened by family names. It was a story of grit, of a woman who had to prove, again and again, that her place was earned, not given. Crockett's path into law wasn't paved with luxury. It was carved out of persistence. She put herself through school, balancing the relentless workload of academics with the realities of being underestimated at every turn. In classrooms, she felt the weight of stereotypes pressing down, whispering that she didn't belong. Professors doubted, peers dismissed, and yet she pressed forward. Every exam passed. Every credit earned became another piece of armor against a world determined to minimize her. When she entered the courtroom, the challenges didn't stop. As a young black woman practicing law, she found herself questioned in ways her white male counterparts never were. Judges scrutinized her arguments more closely. Opposing counsel underestimated her, assuming inexperience where there was only sharp preparation. But Crockett thrived on being underestimated. She learned to anticipate attacks, to sharpen her words until they cut through arrogance like glass. Her legal career was not just about winning cases. It was about serving communities that too often went unheard. She took on clients who couldn't afford high-powered firms, fought for rights that were casually dismissed by those in charge, and built her reputation not on spectacle, but on substance. The victories she won were not flashy, but they were vital. Families kept together, voices defended, justice served when the odds seemed impossible. Public service was a natural extension of that calling. Crockett stepped into politics not to accumulate power, but to amplify the struggles she had witnessed firsthand. Each campaign stop, each town hall, carried the echoes of her own journey. The need to be twice as prepared, twice as determined, just to be seen as equal. And with each step forward, she carried not only her own ambitions, but the hopes of countless others who saw in her a reflection of their own battles. This was the fire Mark Levin could never understand. His privilege had shielded him from the weight of proving worth in rooms designed to doubt you. For Crockett, every credential, every degree, every victory had been forged under that pressure. She didn't wear them as ornaments. She wore them as survival, as proof that resilience could outlast ridicule. And that resilience had prepared her for this very moment. Facing Levin's sneer, Crockett was not shaken. She had stared down worse. Professors who questioned her intelligence, colleagues who minimized her role, critics who whispered that she wasn't ready. She had faced it all and turned it into fuel. So when Levin laughed at her law degree, he wasn't exposing weakness. He was striking the strongest part of her story, the foundation built on struggle, persistence, and unshakable resolve. And it was this very journey that gave her the perfect ammunition to silence Levin. Levin leaned forward as if he had already won, his smirk spreading like a man savoring the final word. His laugh echoed again, short and sharp, the kind of laugh that wasn't meant to amuse but to wound. His hand waved dismissively, as though brushing away Crockett's years of study, her sleepless nights, her hard-fought victories in court. To him, her law degree was nothing more than paper, a prop he could crumble with ridicule. The room picked up on his performance instantly. A few chuckled nervously, others shifted in their seats, unsure whether to laugh along or recoil at the condescension. Cameras zoomed in, capturing the tilt of Levin's head, the gleam in his eye. He was relishing the moment, the appearance of dominance, the illusion that his mockery had silenced her. The room picked up on his performance instantly. A few chuckled nervously, others shifted in their seats, unsure whether to laugh along or recoil at the condescension. Cameras zoomed in, capturing the tilt of Levin's head, the gleam in his eye. He was relishing the moment, the appearance of dominance, the illusion that his mockery had silenced her. But Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. She didn't meet his smirk with outrage, nor his laugh with anger. Instead, she held still, deliberately still. Her pause wasn't hesitation. It was precision. Every second of silence tightened the air in the chamber, drawing every gaze toward her, forcing the room to lean in, waiting. The murmurs quieted. The smirk on Levin's face began to look less like confidence and more like bait dangling in the air. Would she swallow it, lashing out in frustration? Would she retreat, letting his insult hang unchallenged? Or would she do something else entirely? Those watching at home felt the tension through their screens. It was the oldest question faced by anyone mocked by power. Do you absorb the humiliation, or do you set the fire that flips it back? Crockett's eyes sharpened. The pause was over. She drew a breath, steady and unhurried, as if the insult had not struck her, but merely opened the door for what she had prepared all her life to say. The hush in the chamber grew heavier, a silence not of defeat, but of anticipation. And then, with surgical calm, she began her clapback. Crockett leaned forward at last, her voice calm, deliberate, every word chosen like a blade sharpened to a fine edge. "You laugh at my law degree," she began, her tone unshaken, as though it were a joke. "But let me remind you, Mr. Levin, that unlike you, I didn't inherit doors already opened. I had to break them down myself." The room stirred. Levin's smirk faltered ever so slightly, but she pressed on, each phrase steady, measured. "You want to laugh at my education? That degree was not handed to me at an Ivy League cocktail party. I earned it through late nights, through sacrifice, through the kind of struggle you wouldn't last a day in. And that degree didn't just sit on a wall. It went with me into courtrooms where I fought for people who had no one else to stand for them." Gasps flickered through the chamber. Crockett's voice rose just a notch, not shouting, but commanding. "Do you want to mock credentials, Mr. Levin? Let's compare. I've defended families from eviction. I've fought to keep children in safe homes. I've gone up against prosecutors who thought they could steamroll the powerless. And every single time, I walked into those rooms underestimated. Just like you're underestimating me now." She paused, letting the silence sink in. Levin shifted uncomfortably. "But here's the difference," she continued, her voice slicing through the tension. "Your privilege mocks what my hard work earned. You were born into a system designed to nod along when you spoke. I had to earn the right to be heard. Every title, every position, every victory, none of it was gifted. All of it was fought for." The audience erupted in scattered applause, murmurs swelling into energy that Levin could no longer control. His smirk had vanished, replaced by a tightness around the jaw, the unease of someone realizing the narrative was slipping away. Crockett wasn't done. She leaned back slightly, her eyes never leaving him. You can laugh at degrees, but you can't laugh away results. You can't laugh away the fact that I have stood in courtrooms where people's lives were on the line and won. You can't laugh away that I am here, not because I shouted the loudest, but because people trusted me to fight for them. Something your mockery has never achieved. Levin tried to interject, but his words faltered, tripping over themselves. Crockett's composure only made his stammer more glaring. The chamber watched, rapt, as the balance of power shifted entirely. Then came her closing strike, calm, precise, undeniable. So yes, Mr. Levin, laugh if you must. Because every time you laugh at me, you expose exactly what you are afraid of. That someone like me, who wasn't supposed to be here, who wasn't supposed to succeed, stands here anyway. Stronger, sharper, and unshaken by men who mistake arrogance for authority. Silence fell. Heavy. Total. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. And then, as though on cue, the room erupted, applause, gasps, even cheers that broke through the tension like thunder. Cameras caught the stunned look on Levin's face, his usual fire extinguished in the glow of a woman who had turned his insult into her triumph. It wasn't just a clapback. It was a dismantling, a reversal, a declaration that arrogance could not erase earned truth. Crockett had not only defended her degree, she had elevated it, transformed it into a symbol of resilience for everyone watching who had ever been sneered at for daring to rise. Levin shifted again, fumbling for words, but none came. And the longer his silence stretched, the more powerful Crockett's words became. The chamber knew it, the cameras knew it, and soon, the internet would know it too. Because the moment didn't end there. Online, it became something far bigger. The moment Crockett's words landed, the internet lit up like wildfire. Within minutes, clips of the exchange had been sliced, captioned, and uploaded across every platform. TikTok flooded with edits that replayed her final line, "Arrogance is not authority," over bass drops and slow-motion cuts. Twitter trended with a new hashtag lawyered by Crockett, plastered across timelines as users from every corner of the political spectrum weighed in. Memes were merciless. One showed Levin's face frozen mid-smirk, captioned, "When you laugh at her degree, but she has receipts." Another paired Crockett's calm composure with the phrase, "the silence before storm." On Instagram Reels, creators spliced her. Clapback with reaction videos, hands over mouths, wide eyes, cheers as if they had been in the room themselves. News outlets couldn't resist. Commentators across cable networks replayed the exchange, some calling it the takedown of the week, others labeling it a masterclass in composure. Even those not typically aligned with Crockett admitted it was a devastating counterpunch. Analysts noted how Levin's stammer and silence revealed more than his words ever could. The narrative had shifted, a seasoned radio titan, silenced by the very credentials he mocked. Colleagues rallied around her. Fellow representatives tweeted their support, calling her a model of grace under fire. Activists praised her for defending not just herself, but everyone who had ever been underestimated or dismissed. The wave built higher when celebrities chimed in, actors, musicians, and influencers sharing the clip with messages like, "This is how you handle arrogance," and Jasmine Crockett, remember the name. The ripple effect reached classrooms, where law students reposted her words as inspiration. Community leaders cited her in speeches, using her response as proof that preparation and dignity can dismantle even the loudest mockery. For many, it wasn't just political theater, it was validation. Meanwhile, Levin's allies struggled to spin the moment. His fans clipped only fragments, tried to dilute the impact, but the internet was unforgiving. The full video was everywhere, impossible to ignore. His laugh, once intended as dominance, became the punchline. By the end of the week, Crockett wasn't just trending, she was a symbol. A woman who had taken an insult designed to humiliate her and turned it into a rallying cry for resilience. But Crockett didn't just win the exchange. She turned it into a universal lesson. In the days that followed, Jasmine Crockett made it clear that Levin's insult was never about her alone. She reframed it, not as a personal attack, but as a window into something millions of Americans know too well: the sting of being told you don't belong, even after you've done everything right. Where Levin had tried to reduce her to a punchline, she transformed his laughter into a mirror reflecting his own insecurity. Dignity, she explained in an interview, isn't about where you come from, it's about how you stand when someone tries to push you down. Those words resonated because they carried the weight of lived truth. Crockett had stood tall in that chamber, not because she wanted applause, but because she had lived her entire life preparing for that moment. Every stereotype she overcame, every barrier she broke, gave her the armor to face arrogance without flinching. For viewers, the lesson was deeply personal. Immigrants who had worked double shifts just to afford school saw themselves in her defiance. Young women in law programs reposted her speech with captions like, "We belong here." Parents who had been told their children would never make it found validation in her triumph. She had taken a moment of elitist belittling and turned it into an anthem of perseverance. And the contrast couldn't have been sharper. Levin's privilege had led him to mock what he didn't understand, the kind of success born from struggle. His arrogance, once his greatest weapon, had been exposed as weakness. Crockett's calm, rooted in hard work, outshone his performance. In her silence before the clapback, people recognized the discipline of someone who had carried the weight of doubt her whole life and learned to turn it into power. The story became more than politics. It became universal. It was about every student who studied twice as long to prove they were worthy, every worker who put in extra hours just to be taken seriously, every voice that had been laughed at by someone who assumed laughter could erase truth. Crockett stood not as a distant figure in Congress, but as an every-woman hero, embodying resilience against ridicule. She reminded the country that real authority is not measured by the volume of your voice, but by the steadiness of your resolve. And in the end, her message rang louder than any insult Levin could throw. Justice is earned, dignity cannot be mocked away, and resilience, true, lived resilience, always wins. Mark Levin mocked Jasmine Crockett's law degree, certain that laughter could strip it of meaning. Instead, it became the very weapon that silenced him. Her clapback was more than a rebuttal. It was proof that when power sneers, truth answers, and dignity outshines arrogance every single time. If this moment spoke to you, don't let it fade. Share it, subscribe, and be part of a community that refuses to stay silent when arrogance tries to crush resilience. Because Crockett's story isn't just hers. It's a reminder of what we all can do when we rise with truth.